I love it. What a special day. We get to celebrate moms. We get to celebrate baptisms. We get to commission our parents. Even today, we had our college graduation yesterday, and I know the room's a little lighter with college students, but we get to even just say goodbye to these college students who've been with us, and what a special day. We're going to be in the book of Isaiah, chapter 6. Now, throughout the month of May, we are just hanging out in this chapter of the book of Isaiah. This is one of the most memorable, one of the most climactic moments in all of Scripture. But really, I think to grasp it, like we need the bigger picture, right? Isaiah, he was a man caught in the middle. He was a prophet who stood in a crumbling Jerusalem. There was some hard things going on, and he was the one called by God to speak these hard truths to some of the corrupt leaders of his time. He warned of a coming judgment where God would let his people fall prey to their enemies. This wasn't an ending of Israel, but it was a purifying moment, which meant like this purifying fire was going to come and burn away the dross to leave only the gold. Isaiah could see, even in the devastation of the family tree of Israel, when it was being chopped down to its stump, he could see that there would be a future led by a king of true justice, a light that would reach every nation, and a hope that starts with this little shoot out of the line of Jesse. Here's the thing that we're asking kind of in this month that we focus on sending. How does a person like Isaiah find the courage to speak those truths to a world that won't listen? How does he have the resolve to stand up before corruption? Well, the answer is found in this encounter in chapter 6, okay? If we want, as a church, as followers of Christ, if we want to be a people who live sent in our homes, who live sent in our neighborhoods, who live sent in our classrooms and in our workplaces and to the ends of the earth, then we need to have this kind of encounter with God. We need to see God like Isaiah did. Now, I want to be honest with you guys. I like being honest with you guys. I'm a bit of a specialist when it comes to avoidant behavior. You know what I'm talking about? Like if I see a phone number I don't recognize, straight to voicemail. I'm not picking it up. It doesn't even have to say potential scam. Like I'm just not going to. Honestly, if I have the number in my phone and I see that you're calling, I'm probably just going to let it go to voicemail. Like that's how good at avoidant behavior that I am. If a light comes on my dashboard, you know what I'm going to do? Probably take a little piece of tape, put it over the light, and not think about it anymore. Like that is how good I am at avoiding problems. I don't know if you're as skilled as me in that arena, but we all have those areas in our life, right, where we think that if we just ignore something long enough, if we don't think about it, maybe it'll just get better. We treat reality, like a push notification, like we just want to swipe that thing away. But are we ready to deal with the hard truths? Okay? Are we ready to deal with the hard truths? Are we ready to stand in front of God and have Him undo us? When Maddie and I got married, Dan, who did the parent commissioning, Dan was our officiant, okay? And he called me on the day of the rehearsal dinner, and he just asked, he said, hey, what should I wear? And I said, well, nothing fancy. Like, I'm probably going to wear some khakis and, a button-up shirt, and like, we're just having barbecue. Like, that's all that's all it is. He's like, are you sure? Like, just button-up shirt. I said, yeah, like, that's fine. You could wear jeans if you want to. I just said, it's totally fine. Well, Dan, he was asking about the wedding ceremony. He wasn't asking about the rehearsal dinner. And so I show up the next day to the ceremony in my three-piece suit, and Dan is in jeans, and thankfully, he brought a blazer and a tie, so he threw on a blazer and a tie. It's probably the most embarrassed I've ever seen Dan, okay? And it's hard to embarrass Dan. Have you ever had something like that happen to you? Like all of a sudden, you have this sinking feeling of being completely exposed and woefully out of place. That's a tiny semblance of the taste of what Isaiah is about to walk into. Except he didn't just show up dressed for the wrong party, okay? He stepped into the throne room of the King of the universe, and he was undone. Maybe some of you spend your spiritual lives trying to find ways to ignore the dashboard, trying to find ways to just swipe left on the push notifications. Maybe you're trying to do that in your spiritual life. in the way that you relate to God. Maybe you want some version of faith that just feels like a warm blanket and a pat on the back. But Isaiah's story forces us to ask a really uncomfortable question. What if? What if the most important spiritual experience you could ever have is feeling utterly devastated by God? What if the goal of an encounter with God isn't to walk away feeling better about yourself, but to walk away realizing that you are not the center of the story at all? We think that we can grow, through these small, just manageable self-improvements, but listen, the Bible suggests something way more radical. What if the doorway to genuine transformation is not found in comfort, but in complete spiritual collapse? Before Isaiah could be sent to speak truths to his world, to change his world, he had to be completely undone by the presence of the Holy One. He wasn't just underdressed for a party, he was fundamentally undressed in the presence of God, and that's exactly where his life finally begins. So let me read the text. I'm going to read verses 1 to 8. This is the text that we'll be in for the next couple of weeks. Let me just read it, and then we're going to live today in verse 5, okay? So, verse 1, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him stood the seraphim. Each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the foundations of the thresholds shook at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke. And I said, Woe is me! For I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips, for my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. And then one seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a burning coal that he had taken with tongs from the altar, and he touched my mouth and said, Behold, this has touched your lips, your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for. And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And then I said, Here I am, send me. All right, camping out in verse 5 today. And I listen, I just have 3 realizations today. Here's the first one. Isaiah realizes his personal sin. Think about this. Like, Isaiah is a prophet, right? His life has been made up of telling other people God's words. God's judgment is coming because of what they have been doing. He's speaking judgment on the people from God. He is a mouthpiece to the people from God. And now, suddenly, he realizes that he is the one who is completely wrong. In the chapters leading up to this, Isaiah was the one pointing the finger. He declared these 6 different woes against the wicked and the corrupt. He was the divine prosecutor. He was the guy with the moral high ground. But the second that he sees the Lord, the moment he is confronted with God's glory, the prosecutor becomes the defendant. He stops saying woe to them and he starts crying out, Woe is me. He realizes he needs the sermon more than anyone else in the room. When Isaiah cries out, Woe is me, for I am lost, he's literally saying that he is undone. Lost is equal to undone, coming apart at the seams, completely coming apart. He is describing a state of complete ruin. The Hebrew word for undone can actually be used in a context that conveys this idea of being silenced too. Imagine that. In this context, a man whose entire life and identity are built on his words, on what he says, on what he communicates, his ability to speak for God, he's suddenly finding it, he has absolutely nothing left to say. In the presence of absolute holiness, the man of words is reduced to total silence because he realizes what a sinful creature he is and how a sinful creature cannot survive an unmediated encounter with our God. The reason this hit Isaiah so hard is that he finally stopped measuring himself by the wrong standard. Usually, what we usually do is we like to compare ourselves, to our neighbors or to people on the news to make ourselves feel better. But Isaiah stopped looking at the unclean people around him, and he started looking at the Holy One. Here's the deal. True self-knowledge only shows up when we stop looking at others and we start looking to God. When we stop looking in the mirror, when we stop looking at our neighbors. The light of God's glory did not make Isaiah dirty. It simply revealed the dirt that had been there the whole time. And to me, listen, I love this part, okay? But what's really wild to me is that Isaiah chooses to confess. He says, "Woe is me, for I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips." He doesn't talk about his hands. He doesn't talk about his feet. He goes straight for the very instrument of his calling. He realizes that even his best work, his religious service, his speaking for God is contaminated by his nature. It is a devastating realization that the thing that you are most proud of, that the thing that God has gifted you, your spiritual gift, the thing that you're good at, your talent, that is the actual thing that's stained by the same sin as everyone else's? And listen, for him to say this meant, by the religious rules of the day, that Isaiah was now disqualified from even being in the temple. He was a prophet who could not speak. He was now legally excluded from God's presence. To admit that he had unclean lips. And he's standing there in the temple of God, realizing he has no right to be there. He finally connects the dots, right? To the source of his problem. His lips were unclean because his heart was unclean. He wasn't just confessing some accidental slip of the tongue. He wasn't confessing some one-time mistake. He was confessing his nature. He realized that corruption wasn't just something he did. It's who he was. I'm a man of unclean lips. That's who I am. I think about this as the terrible kindness of God. When God lets you see who you truly are before him, when you're all on your own, you come undone. It's terrible because there's nothing that you can do. And it's kindness because he isn't obligated to show you. He owes you nothing, and yet he gives you this gift. Isaiah's whole undoing is the necessary first step of him being sent. So what if that's yours? What if that's what you have to do before a holy and righteous God, is to see yourself as you truly are apart from him? Isaiah had to be reduced to a beggar before he could be sent as a messenger. So don't miss that first realization, okay? Here's the second one. Isaiah realizes their corporate sin. One of the most striking things about Isaiah's breakdown in the temple is that he doesn't try to use his neighbors as a shield to make himself look better. He says, "Woe is me, for I am lost. I am a man of unclean lips. And then I dwell in the midst of people of unclean lips." So think about it. Usually when we get caught in a mess, our first instinct is to point at someone else and say, "Well, at least I'm not as bad as that guy." Or moms, you know how kids are. When you catch them red-handed, "Oh, it was my brother, it was my sister," you know? We shift the blame. But Isaiah, he does the exact opposite. He looks at the staggering holiness of God and realizes that he is linked to the mess around him. He's one of them. He doesn't distance himself from the sins of his nation. Instead, he acknowledges that he is embedded in the midst of a people of unclean lips. He's not trying to shift the blame. He's not trying to find a loophole for his own guilt. He is admitting that he is the problem. He realizes that his identity is completely bound up in a sinful community, and he carries a significant share of that accumulated guilt. Sometimes we think of ourselves as isolated from others' guilt. We're so individualistic as a society. We're an island of good in a sea of bad. Our little piece of land is very clean, and the ocean all around us is just cluttered and dirty and disgusting. But Isaiah helps to show us that No one sins in a vacuum. We're all shaped by it. We're all contributors to it. We are sinful creatures. Isaiah realizes that he is not an exception to the rule, but he's a representative of the fallen race. Isaiah looked up, he saw the king, he realized that even his very best qualities were part of a corporate system of rebellion. He recognized that his individual sin exists within the larger structure of corporate sinfulness. It's refreshing to actually think like that, especially when we look back at our first father. Think back to Adam and Eve for a second. Like when Adam was confronted by God in the garden for eating the fruit he was specifically told to avoid. His first instinct was not to own the mess. He wasn't saying, "Woe is me, for I'm a man of unclean lips, and I live in the midst of a people of unclean lips." No, he wasn't saying that at all. He shifted the blame on Eve. And in doing so, he even tried to pin the sin on God for saying like, "Well, hey, it was this woman that you gave me." Adam tried to use his community as a shield to protect his ego. He attempted to distance himself from the guilt by pointing the finger at the person who was standing right next to him. Isaiah refuses to play the blame game. He's not doing that. He realizes that there is no such thing as a bystander when it comes to sin. He doesn't say like, "Hey, I'm only in this mess because of this people that you put me with, God." He doesn't say that like, "Hey, because I was born into this nation, into this people, this is because of you, God. Look at what they've done." No. He says, "I am just as unclean as they are." And using that phrase "in the midst of," like he acknowledges that he is embedded within. He's not separate from the nation's rebellion. He's not looking for that loophole. He's not saying like that there's a way to stay clean when everyone else is dirty. He understands that his identity is fundamentally bound up in his community. So which one are you in this situation? Like, are you obsessed with being the exception to the rule? You know, you're the one person who isn't like all the other people. Are you so occupied with yourself being right that you'll throw anyone standing by under the bus? Or do you see your sinfulness as part of the whole? Isaiah recognizes that corporate sin isn't just something that happens out there in the world, but something that lives within his own community, within his own heart, within his own lips. When we stop acting like Adam and we start acting like Isaiah, we can actually begin to see God for who truly is. We can admit that being part of a fallen race isn't about wallowing in shame. It's about finally telling the truth, about being undone. When we admit that we're undone and lost, we can actually be in a position to be helped. Isaiah's corporate confession shows us that the way to move forward isn't by distancing ourselves from the brokenness, but by identifying with it. And then realization number 3, okay? Isaiah realizes the divine authority, okay? He finally identifies the source of the crisis. Like, why is he undone? The reason that his knees have hit the floor, the reason that his voice has failed him, he says, "For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." This is the divine recognition. Like, this is him acknowledging who God is. Isaiah realizes that he isn't just having a bad day. It's not just some momentary lapse in confidence. He has come face to face with the weight of the sovereign Lord. And he uses 2 specific titles here. First, he calls him the King. The King. He's emphasizing his absolute royal authority. This is the one seated on the throne. This is the one high and lifted up. He holds life and death in the palm of his hands. He is the sovereign Lord who remains high and lifted up, while earthly thrones sit empty and nations tremble in the vacuum of power. To see the King is to realize that your life and every life is subject to a rule that is eternal and unshakable and absolute. We don't put him there. We don't vote him there. He is. He also calls him Lord of hosts, this is also terrifying. This is describing God as the commander of the heavenly armies. This is Yahweh, the general, leading a celestial multi-billion man army whose mere voice make the foundations of the earth tremble. You think the war drums at Helm's Deep were bad. Just wait till you hear the thunder of his war cry. He is not some distant deity. He is the warrior king at the head of an unstoppable, terrifying force, a force that dwarfs any human military power or earthly threat. To stand before that Lord of hosts is to realize that you are a rebel, caught standing completely defenseless, standing before that army, standing before the general who commands the very stars and spirits of our heavenly bodies. And this recognition, I think it triggers a necessary terror, a fear. Isaiah understands the theological reality that a sinful creature cannot survive an unmediated encounter with some absolute militant purity. He can't do it. His cry of being undone is the only logical reaction to a sinner realizing that they are fundamentally out of place and functionally as good as dead in the presence of someone who is holy. We see, this reminds me so much, we see this same crushing weight of glory in Revelation chapter 5. One of my favorite chapters of the Bible. The Apostle John, who's writing it, he's caught up and being shown this vision of the end of days, and the scroll is being brought out that has the very destiny of the world, the completion of God's plan written inside it. It's the legal deed to creation, but it's sealed tight. And this mighty angel cries out to the entire universe, demanding to know who has the moral authority, who has the absolute purity required to break the seals and to open it. Who can do it? Who is worthy? And the response to that question is deafening. It is this terrifying silence. No one in heaven or on earth or under the earth is found worthy to open the scroll. It's over. And the Apostle John weeps uncontrollably because he realizes the same thing that Isaiah did. Without a mediator, being in the presence of the sovereign Lord is a death sentence. This is the utter hopelessness of man standing before God. A realization that we don't need a life coach. We need a miracle. Listen, this is the state of humanity before God when we were left to our own devices, without a mediator, without someone to stand in our place. The presence of God is not a comfort. It's a death sentence. Isaiah was a good man by our standards, okay? He was a prophet, he was a religious leader, he was a man of God, and yet the sight of the king made him feel like he was being deleted from existence. If a man like Isaiah is being undone by the king of the universe, where does that leave the rest of us? I'm not as good as Isaiah, I'll tell you that. I'm not as strong as Isaiah. I'm not as confident as Isaiah. Without Christ, we are exactly where Isaiah was. We're silenced, we're disqualified, we're standing in the path of a holiness that acts like a consuming fire. So I'm doing the best I can to help you feel the weight of the woe. If you feel the hopelessness of trying to measure up to a standard that's literally infinite, think about infinity for a second. It just boggles your mind. Think about eternity, forever and ever and ever. When you get to the point where you feel so small and so undone, then you're finally standing where Isaiah stood. You're finally seeing the king for who he truly is. We have to sit in that hopelessness for a moment. We have to feel the weight of someone else wearing the crown, because until we realize that we are the ones weeping in Revelation 5, we're the ones that realize that no one is worthy to stand before the Lord of hosts on their own merit, then the gospel won't sound like good news. It'll just sound like good advice. The beauty of the gospel is that the king did not stay on the throne to watch Isaiah crumble. In Revelation, someone tells John, hey, stop weeping, because the Lion of the tribe of Judah has triumphed. He's conquered. Behold, the Lamb standing as though he had been slain. Ah, what beautiful imagery. The King, Jesus, the Lord of hosts, Jesus, the one who was and is to come, Jesus. And here in Isaiah chapter 6, the king does not leave Isaiah in the dust. He doesn't just delete him. And we're going to talk about that next week, okay? We're going to see how beautiful it really is to be redeemed, to have a redemption. But we have to see the king. We have to realize our ruin. We have to admit that without his intervention, without him coming in, without him stepping into our place, we have no hope of surviving an encounter with him. So just ask yourself, have you ever actually seen the king? Have you ever been so low and broken and undone that your only response is, woe is me? Not like, have you seen a God who you agree with? But the Lord of hosts, who makes the foundations shake. Genuine transformation starts when we stop trying to manage God and start being overwhelmed by God. It's the place where our woe is me turns into you are worthy. We finally find ourselves at the feet of the only one who can say your guilt is taken away and your sin is atoned for. I love it, that good news. So as we wrap up today, I just want to leave you with a question, okay? And it might sting a little, I don't know. But if your worship never produces discomfort, have you truly encountered the Holy One? Honestly. Have you ever been brought to tears, standing in the midst of knowing who you are? We live in a culture that is obsessed with finding ourselves through introspection, through counseling. But Isaiah's encounter proves that the only thing that matters when you look inward, the only thing that matters is that you see your true state before God. Introspection, while good, counseling, while good, it only gets you so far. You don't find your true identity by looking in a mirror. You find it when you look up and you see the King. The reality that we see in the temple is that God doesn't just want to improve your life, He wants to dismantle your version of you. He wants to undo you. We have to be willing to be undone by His holiness before we can ever be deployed for His service. For Isaiah, that undoing was a terrible kindness. It was the diagnosis that made the cure possible. And in just a moment, we're going to see and celebrate and witness that same process of undoing and remaking. A celebration of that. A pointing to that. A promise of what is to come. Baptism, it's the ultimate visual of a person saying, woe is me, for I am lost. It is a burial, it's a total collapse of the old self, followed by a resurrection into a brand new life to show that they are a new creation. The old has passed away, behold, the new has come. That brand new life that's finally clean and finally atoned for and finally sent. Isaiah stood in the temple. He realized that he was as good as dead in the presence of the king, but then that coal touched his lips, and God said, your guilt is taken away. You are atoned for. And as these brothers and sisters, as they step into the water today, they're declaring that their guilt has been taken away, not by coal, but by the king who left his throne to die in their place. They're not going to be here because they found themselves. They're here because they were found by the Lord of hosts. So as we celebrate these baptisms, let's be a people who stop hiding behind getting rid of notifications and putting tape over the problem on the dashboard. Let's stop being a people like that. And let's be a people who are willing to be undone so that we can be truly made new. Let me pray. God, thank you that the good news of the gospel is good because there was something bad. There was something unworthy. God, let us see the beauty of your grace because we know the depths of our sin. Even today, Lord, undo people. Crush people with your terrible kindness. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Hey guys, Pastor Brody here. Just wanted to let you know that our leadership team has been praying that God will use this sermon to help build you up into the image of his son, Jesus Christ, and that he would do that in conjunction with the local church. So if you're here in the area, why don't you stop by this weekend? Why don't you see us in person and really get connected to what God is doing here? If you're not here, we pray the same for where you are. Get connected to your local church. We think that's one of the best things that you can do. Thanks so much for watching this, and I pray that it blesses you.